I am suddenly craving popcorn with extra buttery on it.
Yeah.
Okay, so back to Alessandro, who figured out that frogs do not create electricity. I think until this day we have yet to prove that otherwise, which leads us to the voltic pile, which is not what you think it is.
Voltage pile?
Voltic pile.
Voltage pile.
Yes. This is the bad thing. I can't pause when I'm spelling VOLTAIC, a voltaic pile. That is the first practical battery.
Invented by Private Pile.
What was Private Pile's first name?
Voltaic.
Oh, come on, man. It's
Voltaic.
Gomer.
Private Voltaic pile.
Gomer Pile. All right. That was an alternating stack of silver and zinc discs separated by discs of cardboard soaked in salt solution. So that was, so we had, nope, let's try this.
It is a trick that they invented that shit. I doubt they went to school for anything like that.
They had Kevin to teach them.
Nah, it's not, I was just going to draw it out. But alternating stack of silver and zinc discs. Zinc discs, I say, separated by cardboard soaked in salt water.
I didn't even know they had cardboard back then. That's what I was thinking.
I know.
Cardboard. It was cardboard.
Soaked in salt water. I didn't know they had salt water back then, but salt solution is more like it. I mean, there's some good and bad. What's the bad downside of this?
Once it dries out,
It's-
the cardboard isn't
Sounds
very
like
conductive.
a pain in the ass to have.
Yeah, well, I'm sure silver is rather expensive.
And that too. Who knows what the price was back then though? They used to make candles out of silver.
Yeah, and you have to go to the grocery store and get cardboard boxes and cut those down. So, which in the 1800s was hard. You know.
Yeah. Their airplanes must have had a.
Now on the upside, it's got zinc in it, so if you swallow it, it does cure your cold. All right. All right, so dry cells. I don't want to get too much in this. Like a typical flashlight battery, basically. They work the same. Well, all batteries kind of work the same way, but let me see. Work the same way. Work. I'll just put that the same way as a voltaic pile. But it uses a paste instead of an liquid. Uses paste instead of electric. Uses paste. It's going to say post. Now I just screwed it up. I got to remember I can't do that once it does it. P-A-S-T-E. Paste instead of a liquid electrolyte. Paste. Instead of a liquid electrolyte. Come on, you can do it. It did it! Yay! Well, it does all right. Trying to decide what to cut out, save time, see world. So it uses a combination of different materials. You know, and it seems like batteries are getting more and more exotic as we move along. So some things I have are zinc, copper, carbon, lithium ion, lithium manganese dioxide, nickel, oxyhydroxide, silver oxide. It's not like I'm going to ask you to remember these things. These are all various metals. And so, you know, we've gone from lead acid, NiCad, now we're into lithium batteries. And so, you know, it's just same with the little flashlight batteries. They're doing the same stuff. I guess we could do this because this is something worth remembering. When cells are connected in series. All right, so it's important to note that, I hope I write this down, but maybe I don't, so you might have to write it. That when you create a cell, the cell creation, the chemical makeup of that cell is going to dictate what the difference of potential between the two plates are. So if I have a lot of electrons on this plate and not many electrons on this plate, what does that say about the voltage?
Higher.
Fair question.
Oh, it's not balanced.
That has nothing to do with the voltage. That is amperage. So voltage is a difference of potential, which we get from the materials.
You're saying that some batteries are made like that? That's how they
Now,
make a higher amperage or lower amperage batteries?
Amperage has to do with the surface area of the plate. So let's do that. I'll write this. Voltage.
Do they do that though? They make a battery with one side of it charged way more than the other side, or?
That's battery.
But well, I
That's
mean,
all
so what are
batteries.
you saying? Then I think it was like a little bit lost on that sentence, I guess.
All right. Let's see if I can. V-O-L-T-A-G-E. Voltage. So voltage is a function of the material. The material. So, jumping ahead, lead acid batteries that we're going to talk about, which would be what, primary or secondary? Storage battery, secondary. They have a voltage of how many volts per cell?
1.67 for a 12-volt battery.
There's 6, there'd be more, so it's got to be 2.2, right? And a NiCad has a cell as a voltage of
1.25.
how much?
1.25.
Well, yeah, the book says 1.25. So if a NiCad single cell has a voltage of 1.25, but a lead acid battery has a voltage of 2.2, there's a difference of a volt between the two. It's a function of the materials. All right, now we could look at it a different way. So we could take one cell from a lead acid battery and one cell from a NiCad battery, and we could take like flashlight, some sort of light, not LED because we don't have all day, and we could connect it. We could say, well, which one's going to last longer? That's a function of how big they are. So if I had a lead acid battery that was the size of a 9-volt, that wouldn't last very long. Have more voltage, but it wouldn't last as long. Or I could have a NiCad that has a lot less voltage, but it's huge, would last a long, long time. So amperage, or amp hours as it's called, is a function of the size. So material, and we'll say amp hours. Battery size. Okay, so now having said that, where I was going with this is that, I already said it. When cells are connected in series, let's finish that thought, the voltage is increased. that did not work out to my benefit. So if I have a NiCad battery and the cell is how much? 1.2, and I put another one in series with it, I get, well, it's 1.2 plus 1.2 is 2.4. And now another one in series, I add another 2.4 volts, and I keep adding them in series until I get as many volts as I want out of the battery. But if I take those plates and I put them in parallel, then what happens? Amperage increases. So when cells are connected in parallel, nope. Oh, ooh, that one really didn't work out. Voltage remains the same.
So if you connect them in series, then the ampage all remains the same.
Hang on.
So that's kind of like the series parallel circuit.
It's exactly. When cells are connected in parallel, the voltage remains the same. But what? The amperage. I would say the amperage available. That's what I'll say. But yeah, I like that. The amperage available. Amperage available capacity increases.
Would the capacity increase on both? And both, if you hooked it up parallel or series? Because you're still adding more potential, right? Is that right?
That
Like
is
the
true.
available
That
amps.
is true. Yeah, but our amperage goes up.
What's your amperage?
Which yeah, well we call it the amp hour capacity. That's what I should just leave with that.
Just kind of thinking of it like if it's series, it's just pretty much stacking more cells in line. Whereas if it's parallel, it's pretty much just making the plates larger. In essence, like you're
Yes. Or if we think about our circuit that we made before, where if it's in series, we add the voltages going around, and when it was in parallel, voltage remained the same, but we added the amperage, so the amps available went up. Then I want to say amps. I'm not even going to say amp hour capacity right now. I'm just going to leave it out. Let's say, but the amperage available increases. I'm going to leave it at that so that we don't get confused. Which is to say that the available amperage increases, but it doesn't mean it is, right? Because of Ohm's law. Just because I take a whole bunch of batteries and I put them all in parallel, the available voltage is the same. The available amperage, or the voltage is the same. The available amperage goes up. So if I take a resistor, the battery is capable of putting out 400 amps. Is it going to use 400 amps? No, it's not. But I could if I wanted to, depending on the load. It's just going to be Ohm's law. So, all right. I'm just going to throw this one out here now because it's probably going to be worth repeating, and that is amp hour capacity. And I do believe I get into that. Yeah, I do. Batteries are rated at amp hour capacity. I don't know. I had some rechargeables that said right on here before. I don't know if these little guys do. Probably not. But my rechargeables do somewhere. Size. No, it just says 1.5 volts. I have 1.5 volts stuck on like this. How many volts do I got here?
3.
3 volts. All right. So the amp hour capacity in these things is, I don't know, a couple hundred, a couple thousand milliamp hours or something like that. So batteries are rated in amp hour capacity. Like the battery that came out of my aircraft is, who was working with the bigger ones? It's not, they're G35s, but it's not 35 amp hours. It's something other than that, which it's like a,
23 amp hours.
yeah, something like that. So
And the G25s are like 18 amp hours.
yeah, I hate that. Let's just go with an easy number. So let's say we have a battery that's 25 or 20 amp hour. So I can do it. Amp hours. How's it? Amp hour. That doesn't look right. Amp hour. That looks closer. Okay, 20 amp hours. Which is to say that I could get 1 amp $1 amp
20 hours.
for 20 hours. Or I could get 20 amps for 1 hour.
Or
The ratio.
5 amps for 1 or for 4 hours.
Oh, okay, so 5 amps for 4 hours. And if you look at that,
40 amps for 30 minutes. If it goes less than an hour, you need it just for one big crank.
so it's 1 times 20 equals 20. 20 times 1 equals 20. 5 times 4 equals 20. Would you say for half an hour?
Half an hour, 40 amps.
Oh, yep. So
40 times 0.5.
40 amps for 0.5 hours, which is 40 times 0.5.
And that goes back to your cold crank amps pretty much.
So, well, not yet. So, in fact, I was reading something the other day, and I forget what it was. I thought, oh man, I should have wrote that down. It wouldn't be hard to do, but it was, 1 milliamp for, and it, whatever it was, it ended up being like 600 years or something, right? So, and the point that I want to make there is, this is a theoretical thing, and so in theory that works. If I had a 20 amp hour battery, all I got to do is put the amps on one side, the hours on the other, and those two things equal whatever the amp hour capacity of the battery is, right? And that's the theory. It's not in actuality. In actuality, and I'll cover this again, aircraft batteries are rated, they see what it does over a 5-hour period, and that's what they name it. Because it's not linear. You couldn't do a milliamp for 5 years. The battery just dies on its own after sitting around for that long. And it starts to diminish. You can't do 20 amps for 1 hour. You couldn't do, the 40 amps for half an hour. Yeah, we're going to start to get problems. Well, could we then do 80 amps for 15 minutes? Could we keep doing that? Well, you can't. It just doesn't work that way.
1,880 amps for 1 second.
Yeah, okay, yeah, exactly. Thank you. That's the point I'm looking for. So what did you say?
I think 18,800 amps for 1 second.
18,800 amps for 1 second, 1/60th of all right, something like that. No, you can't do that. All right. It's amps is how many amps for how many hours. It's not linear. Somewhere it's written, and I don't remember exactly where, but aircraft were based on a 5-hour discharge time. But don't let that confuse you. It's still, you look at the battery, it says 20 amp hours. And that is 20 amps for 1 hour. But it's more closely resembles 5 amps for 4 hours. If you really wanted to figure out, well, where is it really going to be truest? It would be that 5 amps for 4 hours. Follow?
So it doesn't matter what they say the amp hour is. If it says 200, whatever, 99, whatever, doesn't matter. You take that and you say, what, 5 hours?
In theory,
If 5 hours and how many?
in theory, it should hold true for 1 hour. It should hold true if you invert it and go how many, 20 amps for 1 hour or 1 amp for 20 hours. In theory, that's what you get. In reality, behind the scenes, when the engineers sat down and said, what should we call this? I know, let's just see what it gives me over a 4-hour block. And they did it for 4 hours. They go, well, we got 5 amps for 4 hours consistently. Good. 5 times 4 is 20. Call it a 20 amp hour. Follow? So,
Bigger the number of cells, better.
yeah. Well, but it's still, in theory, 20 amps for 1 hour. All right, so that's amp hour, which is nothing more than amps times hours. And they got to give it a number. Now, somebody said, and again, I'll come back to this, like cold cranking amps. We don't really use that in aviation, which is kind of a weird thing. We really should. But that is, in theory, and I've got it written down, it's how many amps you get out of the battery, cold cranking amps, a cold battery, how many instantaneous amps you get to operate a starter is what you're looking at. And that's important. Like the battery I just bought, I bought it because they sold it as something that had a higher cranking value because my battery's in the back. Now, we'll come back around to that in a little bit, but I want to just keep, bringing that one. It's an important point. So, 0.7. Oops, because I'm not using the magic pen. 0.7. See what it does. And that's not what I wanted. 7%. That's exactly what I wanted. Okay. Oh, then I figured out I can use this. Look at that. Ooh, delete. Ah, cool. Probably went up here somewhere.
Usually 7 eats.
I know, it's a joke I tell my kids. If I was 6 afraid of 7. Because 7, 8, 9. All right.
Why was 6 afraid of 5?
I don't know.
Because 5 is a registered 6 offender.
Oh, my kids are going to love that joke.
That's a classic right there.
Measuring battery voltage. All right, we have 2 different measurements. There's a way to do this. There. Measuring battery voltage. 2 different measurements. And you already know what they are, or at least one of them, because I was on you for the whole time that you're doing your series, parallel series circuits, and I kept saying, you didn't measure it correctly. So how are you supposed to measure all your circuits, the battery voltage?
Parallel.
Well, in parallel, but how did you measure it? With the leads connected, with the project connected or disconnected?
Connected.
Connected, which is called?
Closed circuit.
Closed circuit voltage. And now you're going to know why it was such a big deal. So 1 is open circuit voltage, because that's what's in my notes first. Yeah, you okay? Open circuit voltage, also called OCV. Yep, OCU is exactly what I wanted. Open circuit voltage. Voltage with an F. It's all the same. It's the French way of pronouncing it. All right, open circuit voltage. Measured with... That's not going to work out. Oh, it did. Measured with no load. I will tell you that batteries lie to you. They're liars, especially NiCad. But you can take a battery that you go out to start your car. You got one of those cars with you leave the lights on and they automatically dim and go off after 4 or 5 hours.
Not me.
Yeah.
Driving 2000. But if I leave them on, I'm screwed.
Yeah, I somewhere. This was so long ago, and some guy left his lights on. Sir, you left your lights on. He goes, "That's right. It's one of those new automatic ones. After 4 or 5 hours, they dim and go off by themselves." So, all right, you leave your lights on for a very long time, and you're like, "Oh man, left my lights on." So what are you gonna do? You get in the car. You
Try to start it.
turn off the lights. You try and start it. It goes, click.
Yeah.
That's a solenoid rattling. So if you were to get out at that point, take out your trusty voltmeter, put on your battery, how many volts would you have?
12.
12.
Sweet.
But wait a minute, how many volts do you need to start your car?
12.
So why didn't it start it?
There's no
It's a
reason
liar.
why.
Current voltage
It's a
is low.
liar, because it's that at that point is open circuit voltage. Lie to you. Tells you it's fine. But then you turn on your headlights and try it again, and you get 4, 2, brown headlights and 4. Why? Because now you did it with a closed circuit voltage, and it's like, all right, I was lying. So measured with no load. Is always higher than the closed circuit voltage. Closed circuit voltage. That almost worked. It's like considering what I give it to work with. I mean, that's pretty impressive. Always higher. Now you're going to be saying, wait a minute. When I was using my 6-volt battery and you came along, like, you did it wrong, do it again. And because you used the open circuit voltage and I made you do it again, you're like, jerk, they're the same. Well, they're not really the same. It's just, it appeared to be the same because your meter wasn't that accurate. So, 3 is usually not affected by state of charge, is usually not affected by state of charge until the battery is almost completely discharged. The battery is I don't really like this. That's why I'm hesitated. It's a little exaggerative. With a lead acid battery, an alkaline battery, it's not quite so much. The battery it has a slope to it. So as it gets discharged, you will see more and more of a difference between closed and open. That's lead acid and alkaline batteries, stuff like that. NiCads, not so much. It is almost a flat line all the way until there's about 20% left and it just drops off a cliff. So it's fine, fine, fine. 1 amp later, you're like, what the hell just happened? So you can really notice that on those. All right, and then the other one is the closed circuit voltage. And why is this so important to know?
That's true. Snap back to reality.
Because you're telling us.
I mean, think about it. I mean, your plan is to go work on airplanes for a living, I'm assuming here. And so somebody says, man, my airplane, I just couldn't get it started. I went in there and got in, turned on the master switch, instrument, because you can hear when you turn on the master switch, everything kind of powers up, gyros start spinning, starts making noise. Pilot's like, I did all that stuff, did my pre-flight, checked the nav lights, checked, ran the flaps up, down, went to start it, I got nothing. No starter. So like, oh, I don't know. We go check it. So you walk out, take the trusty voltmeter, pop off the battery cap, and go, Well, you got a good 12 volts here. Don't know what's going on. Must be a starter. So you order a starter, and you know.
Electrician troubleshooting be like,
Yeah, so you order a new starter. You know, that's $1,000 plus install. Something bad happens while you're trying to do that. You know, as always happens, and that costs more money, and you know, you finally get it done. Well, that doesn't work. Starter wasn't the problem. Must be a starter solenoid. Well, let's get a starter solenoid. Well, good news is starter solenoid's a lot cheaper than a starter. So we'll get you a new starter solenoid. You get a brand new starter solenoid, and that didn't work out any either. So,
Switch.
huh?
It's your switch.
It's got to be the starter switch. Good news is the starter switch is cheaper than the solenoid. So no, it's just more labor because they're harder to get in and out. So we'll switch that out for you.
So we could charge the customer every step of the way.
that's literally how they do it in the Marine Corps.
So
Avionics, that's how they work.
That doesn't work either, so that maybe it's a bad wire.
but I know it's not the battery. I checked it myself with my very own trusty voltmeter, and it had volts. All you had to do is put a little load on it, and you would have seen
4 volts.
2 or 4. So
No.
that's So that's what I got to know. Let's see. So measured with a load. Measured with a load applied. Oh, that's why the battery testers. So when you do that, the internal resistance of the battery check, you have the battery tester. That's why it's got a gigantic stinking resistor in there that glows red hot. It's a load to put it on the battery to see, because you have to test it with the load. Measured with the load applied. Is always more or less. Less open circuit voltage. There we go. Will decrease with an increase in load. In other words, if you needed 12 volts to start it, but you give it enough of a load, it'll show a very low voltage. You know, you have a gigantic cable, and you just, I just got to put a load. I'll just short circuit the whole thing and then check it. Well, you're going to get voltage is going to go pretty damn low, and it's just because you shorted it out there.
You
So
have to have resistance.
yeah.
So, yeah, I'm just saying. No, I'm actually kind of curious about that battery tester, because when we did the lab with the battery tester, I
Shunt?
kind of, the shunt lab was kind of like not really my focus, so I didn't really pay attention too much to what was going on.
Good, love to hear that. So.
Yeah, well, it was like, here you got 5 seconds. Look at this thing and this thing. I'm like, my God. So
Yeah, you can't leave it on for a long time.
right, so you could, with the battery tester, you could just hook it up to your battery, and that puts a load on it.
It does.
And sort of tells you what.
That's exactly what that thing is. It's got 2 leads come off, a red and a black, and a little box that you hold the button.
So it's
It's got a meter on it, so you just put that on there, and the meter is going to go to open circuit. You can leave it on there all day. Then you hit that load button, and it puts it through a big toaster element. You can toast on that thing, and after about 5-10 seconds, you can smell it burning.
Oh wow.
So it gets super
So
hot.
it's like a $100 cigarette lighter.
Cigar lighter.
Cigar lighter.
But it's got a grill on the front, so you can't burn
No,
yourself.
the cigarette lighter.
So, all right, so we'll decrease. All right, and that brings us to this topic, which is what the project. The project's really. You want me to wait?
No, I don't know why it's doing that.
Oh, I thought it was Serena's phone. You should have blamed her. You're moving faster than he was. All right. So that brings us to the project that you were talking about with the battery and the meters. It's not so much about finding the internal resistance of the battery, because really that's sort of immaterial and in some ways even a little confusing. It's more about, can you figure out Ohm's law coming at you from a different way and how to use a shunt and stuff like that. But the point here is internal resistance. internal resistance, or IR, of the battery. IR, internal resistance. So batteries do have internal resistance. And this is a confusing thing when you look at it from two different ways. And you could look at it as this class I'm doing, how they deal with internal resistance, which is, I don't know, it doesn't seem practical. So if you have your 6-volt battery and you said it had, internal resistance of 1 ohm, then you can figure out, well, if it's 6 volts, have 1 ohm, what is my loss of the amps, or the other way around, how many amps, how much voltage loss we have, blah, blah, blah. But we don't really do that in practicality. We just take a battery and we say, here's open circuit, here's closed circuit. That's what you care about, right? Because the closed circuit's the end result that you're trying to deal with. Hopefully that makes sense. Just close, it's just like whatever open circuit is. I don't care what open circuit is. I'm not using that anyway. I'm using closed circuit. So there we go. But the difference between the two helps us get internal resistance. Now here's what's confusing about internal resistance when you think about batteries. If I take a battery that is dead, just freshly died, can't sit around for a long time, but it just freshly died. You left your lights on out there, and we go out and we put a charger on it, like the suitcase charger that we are using, where you can actually adjust the voltage and the amperage will go where it wants to go. So if I put on there 14.2 volts and you have a dead battery, it is going to draw a lot of amps, right? Somebody have a dead battery who tried it? What'd you guys hit?
Oh, what? We were hitting 30 amps when we started charging, and it literally couldn't hit 14.2 volts.
Okay, and then 2 minutes later.
14.2 volts, 24 amps.
There you go. So 2 minutes, you couldn't even get the volt. So they're trying to bring up the voltage, but the current was so high, the machine's like, we got enough current right here, we'll stop. So as a dead battery, when you go to 14 volts, because of that voltage and Ohm's law and low resistance, a lot of amps flow, right? Because that's Ohm's law. And so as the battery starts to charge up, the voltage is locked, the amperage starts to come down. The battery's filling up and the amperage comes down, down, down. So if you look at it that way, you'd say, oh, wait a minute. So if it's a dead battery and I put 14 volts in, I get a lot of amps. Ohm's law says that that would be high or low resistance.
Low.
And as it starts charging, then the resistance must go up to limit the current. And if you think about that, you'd be completely wrong as to what internal resistance is. That is a fact, what I just explained. That is what a battery does. However, when you talk about internal resistance, it's like the opposite of that. It's not a charging function, it's a discharging function. So you just have to remember that. So if you're trying to correlate it in your mind, where, oh, battery does this on a charger, that's resistance, internal resistance is doing that. It isn't. And that's kind of what is a little frustrating with this whole thing. So when we talk about internal resistance, it is, so IR, now we can just do that, save time, see world, is the resistance of a battery. It's going to say battery. Oh, it didn't. Battery. Maybe it's got IA in there. It's like figuring them out. When connected to a load. Connected to a load. So not a charger, connected to a load. And so it is the loss of potential of the battery as it starts to die. I should have wrote that. That was a right thing. Let's see if that works out. It is, I just made that up, the loss of battery potential. That's not going to work out. Ooh, it did. Potential as the battery dies.
Or is discharged? Or is there a difference between battery dying or battery discharged?
I'll use your word, discharged. Discharged. if you like.
So can you think of it also as that like as the battery's being charged, it heats up. That heating up is where part of that resistance comes from, and as it discharges, it also would heat up a little bit, and that resistance discharge.
No, because again, we're opposites.
Okay.
But you're right, though. You're not wrong at all. The battery heats up as you charge. It heats up when you discharge. But we'll stick with this one. But
Yeah.
yeah, but they're just backwards. So, okay, now I'm off on my notes. So, internal
resistance goes up
resistance,
as amperage goes up.
TR, for internal resistance. Internal resistance equals open circuit voltage. Do it. Nope. Open circuit voltage minus closed circuit voltage divided by, I have to do that, divided by current. Which I know this is kind of a new thing for you, but that is like open circuit minus closed circuit is kind of like voltage. And we're trying to find resistance. So if we divide E by the current, we would get R. So that's like you could think about, that. Maybe memorize that. We could call it a law of some sort. What's that?
That guy Owen was up to something. He knew what he was doing.
So basically it's Ohm's law. It's EIR, right? Open circuit minus closed circuit is the difference of potential between the two. That's the voltage divided by the current equals the internal resistance.
It all comes right back around.
I told you, day one. It's all it keeps doing is repeating in just different ways.
So when we want to calculate the internal resistance of a battery, because when you were talking about that, my mind instantly went like to Ohm's law, but just getting the open circuit voltage and then just instantly going into dividing by current to get my resistance. But we're adding, or we're using those two values, the open current
Minus.
minus closed current resistance,
Yeah.
voltage, closed circuit voltage, and then dividing.
Yeah, so it's the difference. It's the difference between open and closed, which is what's left over. So, example. Oops. Example. Let's see.
What are you doing?
I'm learning here. There's a learning curve to this. Try to be cool. Example. Let's see. The battery, the open circuit voltage equals 14 volts. Closed circuit voltage equals 12 volts. And the current is the load or the current equals 100, what did I say here? 100 amps. There we go, make it simple. So what is my internal resistance?
20 milliohms.
20 milliohms. 0.02 ohms.
Yes.
Oh, what's that going to do? But 0.02 ohms, 20 milliohms. It's just that simple. I will tell you that, then I'll let you go. The real trick to measuring this is how are you going to measure 100 amps?
Your shunt. The shunt voltage drop across the shunt.
The shunt. And you have to remember that the voltage drop across the shunt is going to be very, very small. So if you're expecting like a 1 or 2 amp or 1 or 2 volt, you can be surprised. You're not going to get that. So, all right. Don't go away mad.